The Stolen Lake by Joan Aiken, 9. On the second day of Captain Hughes's captivity, a new prisoner was thrust, cursing and struggling, through the door that led into the circular series of rooms at the top of Wen Pendragon Tower. To the captain's surprise, the newcomer turned out to be none other than Silver Taffy, who was equally startled to find his commanding officer in the town jail.
"By jinxa, I never expected to see you in such a place, and that's a fact. What reason did those sons of pigs fetch out for casting you in the lockup?"
The discovery of the captain's incarceration seemed to have done a certain amount toward reconciling Silver Taffy to his own. He grinned broadly, displaying most of his well-polished teeth. At first, Captain Hughes felt inclined to stand on his dignity with this rogue, who had virtually gone absent without leave, and who was, after all, originally a pirate. On the other hand, the captain was becoming heartily impatient with his confinement. Mr. Brandywind made a miserable fellow inmate, for he could do nothing but sit rocking back and forth, lamenting over his wife and child in his limp, paralyzed hands. At least Silver Taffy, though ruffianly, was lively and quick-witted, and might become a possible ally in a scheme that the captain was turning over in his mind. So very much more amiably than might have been expected, he replied,
"The Queen, who, I am persuaded, has windmills in her head, is holding me hostage while Lieutenant Windward undertakes a mission for Her Majesty, a mission for her to King Mabon of Lyonesse. It is a perfectly disgraceful outrage that an officer of His Majesty's Navy should be used to. After all, I have ambassadorial status, but what use to protest? The woman is clearly unhinged. What of yourself, fellow? I trust you are not incarcerated here for criminal activities." His voice did not suggest that he expected his hopes to be fulfilled. Silver Taffy shrugged and winked. "No, sir, but it's something of a different case from yourself. I've always been in the free trading line, you know, fetching butter and astrolabes and wooden goods and such stuff from Lyonesse and Cumbria without troubling the customs. For Queen Ginevra, she levies a cruel high rate of duty on all merchandise as comes in." "You were a smuggler, in other words," snapped the captain. "If you choose to call it so, sir," said Silver Taffy with dignity. "We prefer to call them benefactors." "Very well. I was a benefactor, bringing goods through the mountains by a secret way. But then Cumbrian customs guards, with those darned red and white hellhounds of theirs," here Mr. Brandywind gave a shuddering whimper, "grew so active and fidgety that it became harder and harder to dodge 'em. So me and my mates got us a brig and took to sea, running up and down the coast from Santa Genista to the port of Tenby. Well, then by and by my auntie, she got in touch with me." "Your auntie?" "My auntie Attarde. She is the first lady of the bedchamber and mistress of the... Queen's robes. My family is quality, Captain, I'll have you know," said Silver Taffy with dignity. Though for myself, I've always been partial to a roving life." His teeth flashed again as he grinned, wearing the sly expression that had always made Dido mistrust him. "My auntie, she said to me, 'You've got a ship, David. If you want to do a private errand for Her Mercy, I dare say she will be prepared to overlook certain activities of yours which are otherwise liable to get you dropped into the Severn River one of these days, for the pescadillos to scrunch up. Anyway, I can serve Her Majesty,' says I. 'Of course I'll be proud and willing.' And then she told me how King Mabon's daughter, fresh from boarding school, had sailed out of Bristol, England, on the Maypole, and how it'd be worth her weight in gold Byzance to me if I could see the princess conveyed safe to Queen Ginevra, who would love her like an auntie." "You abducted the princess, you villain!" exclaimed Captain Hughes. "So King Mabon was right in his suspicions. The Queen did have the princess all along. But to what purpose?" "As to that," said Silver Taffy cautiously, "he that asks no questions don't get his tongue chopped out like those poor grey ghosts of sentries round the palace. Yes, I did pick up the princess, and I had her conveyed to my auntie Attarde. But just after that I got tempted northeastwards by a very pretty prize that was coming up from Patagonia, a Hanoverian merchantman. I thought I'd slip her into my pocket afore travelling up to Bath City for to claim my reward from her mercy. But blow me, Captain Hughes, if I didn't run up agin you in the thrush. All my plans go agley, and I get took prisoner and lose my ship and have to work as a common seaman. But then what happens? Why, the old thrush herself runs down to Tenby, and I hear you're going to visit Queen Ginevra your own self. So all I have to do is sit tight, and I have free passage to my own front door. And then, you rogue? Inquired the captain, interested in spite of his strong disapproval. Why, when I did get to see my auntie Attarde, she and I had a difference as to fee. I found out she was a keeping 4/5 of what the Queen had paid her, and passing on to me only a measly 1/5. If I was to pass word to King Mabon about what you did, says I to her, for I'm in Lion East as often as not, and could easily drop word along and in any mousely. If King Mabon was to learn what you did, your life wouldn't be worth a lead bizant. He'd send his agents over to Cumbria somehow and have you tressicated. Why, you treacherous dog, said the captain indignantly. You yourself were implicated just as deeply in the plot to steal Mabon's daughter. Aye, sir, but at least I'm an honest rogue, said Silver Taffy in an injured tone. It was auntie keeping 4/5 of the takings when she promised me half that I couldn't stomach. I'm a hard man to cheat, sir. I can't bear it. Howsomedever my auntie Attarde is a tough nut likewise, and deep as a well, furthermore. Oh, she says, so that's your lay, is it? Well, she says, I'll make a bargain, fetch in the other lass, that young supercargo from the thrush, little Miss Tiltwhite, and you shall have half the prize for the pair. Done, auntie, says I, sapskull that I am, and off I goes, thinking 'twould be an easy matter to pop Twite in the bag along with Mabon's lass. I had one try, and missed her, then blow me if she didn't travel off into the wilds and windward and the rest. And then blow me further, if half a dozen of them grey militia dummies don't grab me and sling me in here. And I know why, too. It's so auntie don't have to pay me her lawful share. It's her doing. She has Queen Ginevra's ear. Close as clams, they be. But I'll get even with her, so I will, when I'm out of the Derwent house. Captain Hughes looked at him thoughtfully. How do you know you ever will get out? He said. Your aunt appears to be in possession of a very great power. It might be in her interest to persuade the Queen that you should stay here for a long time, perhaps for the rest of your life. I don't think I haven't thought the same, said Silver Taffy, but I'm a peavy man to diddle, as Auntie Attarde will learn, and a hard man to fasten down. I'd not have stayed in the thrush if it hadn't suited my book. It's odds I'll find some way out of the coop. If you are of that mind, said Captain Hughes, you and I may yet be of service to one another. It's no use expecting aid or sense from that poor wretch. He glanced exasperatedly at the lachrymose Mr. Brandywind. Your aunt seems to have bewitched him, or he thinks she has, which comes to the same thing. He has lost the use of his hands. Aye, she can play that sort of trick on a poor softy like him, said Taffy scornfully. Nonetheless, Captain Hughes noticed that he made the figure-8 sign, glancing nervously over his shoulder. The sooner they're out of here, Captain, the better pleased I'll be. Did you have any special notion in mind? Why, yes, I have been exercising my wits to some purpose. Come through here and I will show you. Captain Hughes led the way to the chamber where there were paints, paper, and drawing materials. Look, he indicated a mathematical diagram on a large sheet of paper. I have not been wasting my time in here. The design is done, but the construction requires 2 people, because these struts here have to be bent and held in shape, while the fabric is stretched over them, and poor Brandywind is quite useless for that. Silver Taffy bent over the design, and presently a shimmering silver smile split his face. Why, Captain, he said, you were wasted aboard the thrush. You ought to spend your days visiting poor coves in prison. The journey from Lake Arianrhod to the court of King Mabon was achieved in a considerably shorter time than Lieutenant Windward had reckoned. This was due to the fact that King Mabon, grief-stricken at the loss of his child and requiring distraction,
had undertaken a tour of his kingdom, and was, the travelers learned, about to preside over the quarterly assize sessions at his sheep capital of Wandesboro, hardly 50 miles from the frontier, at the spanking pace sent by the frontier patrol on their picked mountain mules. Swift, rangy beasts, short-tempered and sure-footed, it took the party less than a day to reach the assize town. Wandesboro, like Bath, lay in a great upland basin, but its surroundings were green and fertile, kept temperate by balmy breezes from the slopes of Mount Catalonde. For this reason, the last 4 hours of the journey were enlivened by the continuous bleating of sheep, which were pastured in enormous numbers on the high grassy slopes. "What a deal of wool and mutton they must export," remarked Lieutenant Windward. He said this to Dido, kindly trying to divert her mind, for he thought she looked more mopish and downpin. Not even the friendly escort of the legionnaires, in their short tunics and mule hair plumed helmets, or being mounted on a crack cavalry mule, seemed to put any heart in her. She only muttered, "I dare say," in reply to Windward's well-meant remark. "Come, cheer up, little un," said Mr. Multiple. "I reckon when King Mabon hears he's got his dollar back, he'll hand over Queen Ginevra's lake without any roundaboutation, and we'll be posting back to Bath again in the twinkling of a pig's tail. And once she has her blessed piece of water back, not to mention her husband, if Mr. Holystone is really that, which I, for one, take with a bushel of salt, then she'll let Captain Hughes go, and we can all go on our way. And I'll tell you what," he added generously, "I'll go cahoots with you in some of my sparklers, for I've got enough to make us both into nabobs." But even this promise failed to arouse any enthusiasm in Dido. She said, "Thanks, Mr. Mully," in a flat little voice, and continued to gaze glumly at her saddle bow, or sometimes ahead, where Mr. Holystone and Princess Ellen rode in silence side by side. It is a considerable shock when someone you have known, you thought, very well indeed, and have been fond of, not only proves to be a completely different person from the one you believed to be your friend, but also fails to remember you at all. If, on top of that, he turns out to be a king reborn after 1,300 years, the shock is greater still. And if, into the bargain, he is married to one of the wickedest and most horrible people you have ever met, you can hardly help feeling very unhappy about it, especially if he seems to be showing rather too much interest in a princess who certainly isn't his wife. Not that Mr. Holystone talked much to the princess, but all the way on the journey, whether in motion or at rest, they kept near to each other, and there seemed to be a kind of wordless communication going on between them. "What the dickens does it matter to me," Dido said to herself crossly, "if he rides beside her and helps her on and off her moke? I ain't in charge of 'em." But she couldn't help thinking how very much Queen Ginevra would dislike it if she knew that her newly recovered Rex Quondam, instead of making all possible speed back to Bath Regis to greet his long-lost queen, was riding in precisely the opposite direction, by the side of a much younger and very beautiful princess. "The Queen'll never let Captain Hughes out of prison at this rate," Dido thought gloomily, "and we can't go off and leave poor Cap hobbled up in Cumbria. And it's bezants and breadcrumbs she'll grab the lot of us if we go back, have our heads shrunk or our tongues cut out, or drop us in the river for those pesky fish to guzzle." Dido's thoughts were far from cheerful. But when they were about 5 miles from Wandesboro, they saw a mounted party approaching them at full gallop, accompanied by waving banners and the sound of bocinas. And the little brown-faced, roly-poly man on a fiery mountain pony in the lead proved to be none other than King Mabon himself. Impatient for reunion with his daughter, he flung himself off his mount and ran to embrace her, then turned to address her rescuers in a flood of joyful Latin. As this was received by all except Mr. Windward and Mr. Holystone with blank faces, he switched to English. "Heroes, you are indeed, every one of you. My gratitude to the end of your days will be having. Anything in Lyonesse is yours for the asking. Well now, what a big bonny girl you have grown, Cariad. I can see Miss Casterly
fed you all those years on milk and honey. Even if you are a bit skinny just now with you, he added, giving Ellen another hug. And plenty of learning to go with the bonny looks, I am hoping.
Yes, Papa, I can speak 7 languages, and Professor Crumhorn gave me AA for disputation, and I have reached the second part of the calculus.
There now, a blue stocking I have got myself. But as for that Ginevra, said King Mabon, suddenly becoming formidable, as for that fiend in human form, boiling in oil would be too good for her. She should be...
But, Dada...
Well, what?
Gwendion is married to her.
What?
They say that Cousin Gwendion is Queen Ginevra's Rex Quandam.
Who says?
Caradog, the old guardian, and Gwendion himself says it.
The guardian, however, had prudently seen fit to make himself scarce and disappear during the bustle of departure from the pass of Namur. King Mabon said to Mr. Holystone, Is this so, my boy? Are you Mercutius Arturus? Are you the Pendragon?
Yes, it is true, said Mr. Holystone, who still looked very tired.
Then I salute you, my liege lord, and offer you fealty, said King Mabon, going down without more ado on one knobby knee. This was not comfortable for him, since he wore a toga and a short tunic, and the ground was stony. He kissed Holystone's hand, then briskly stood up again. But, my boy, how is it you never knew that before, all those years when you used to visit us as a child and play with Ellen and her brothers? His time had not yet come, interposed Bran, who now, greatly to Dido's astonishment, limped out from among King Mabon's escorting troop. I suppose it was him, as past word, that Ellen was up there in the stable, Dido thought. Bran wore a white tunic and purple toga. A page boy carried his cockatoo. He went on, No use to ask the chrysalis why it is not a butterfly. The hour had not yet struck, nor the hilt of Caliburn come to his hand. But bless me, this puts an entirely new complication on the matter. King Mabon ran a hand through his dark hair, which was cut short, Roman fashion. Married to Ginevra, are you? Shocking pity that is indeed. I don't mind telling you some nasty rumors have been coming through about her these 20 years and more. Still, he added very hopefully, maybe now you are returned to her, she will be a bit more neighborly. Closed her frontier she did years back, and tales that trickle out from Cumbria I would sooner not be believing. I reckon they are all true, Mr. King, said Dido, who saw no reason why she should not take part in this discussion. And who might you be, my dear? King Mabon turned his intense, dark, very intelligent eyes on her.
Why, this is Dido, Papa, who rescued me and helped me out of the cave.
Then it's welcome you are as lambs in spring, said King Mabon. But why are we all standing like this in the fossway? Let us go back directly to Wandesborough, so that the feasting may commence.
They remounted, the troop of legionnaires riding ahead, the frontier patrol behind, and King Mabon and his daughter's rescuers in the middle. King Mabon talked hard all the way.
Now you are back, my boy. And delighted I am, though I won't say it wasn't a surprise.
Wonder what Captain Hughes will say when he finds his steward's a king, Dido thought.
Unification of the 3 kingdoms, need for a strong guiding hand, King Mabon was continuing. Danger from Peru, from Patagonia, and the southern Incas.
Mr. Holystone seemed to have little to say. He remained silent and listened. Bran, who, despite his wooden leg, appeared to be able to ride a mule without any difficulty, came alongside Dido. Noticing her despondent eyes, he broke into one of his little songs, sung very softly for her alone. I like the way you say my name. None others say it quite the same. The syllables sing like notes of a song. When you say it, I wish it were 5 times as long. So when I die, pray don't feel glum, but simply write upon my tomb. Forget his career, but tell this to his credit. His name sounded best in the way that she said it.
Your songs are downright silly sometimes, said Dido crossly. And how did you get here anyway? You belong in Cumbria, and the frontier is closed, King Mabon said. Smugglers, minstrels, and messengers travel where they choose, Bran said. And a good storyteller is welcome anywhere. Shall I tell you a story, child? You appear somewhat despondent. Despondent? Said Dido. Do you expect me to be as chirpy as a cricket? Captain Hughes is in jail, and Mr. Holystone says he's Arthur come back, so he's married to that hateful woman. Her voice wavered. To cover this, she added quickly, Do you reckon that's true? Despite his oddity, she felt sure that Bran would know and give her a true answer, but instead of replying directly, he said, Once there was a wicked rich man who had gained all his riches by despoiling his neighbors. He had particularly abused a man called Abel, taking his land unlawfully, bearing false witness against him. In the end, he had Abel turned out of his house. Abel, penniless, became a sailor, and was absent from his homeland for many years, and came back no richer than he had gone. But when he did come back, Cain, the rich man, was dying. All his ill-won riches could not protect him from death. And as he lay tossing and turning on his velvet couch, he was tormented by one desperate, feverish craving. All my life I have never heard the sound of the sea. Oh, if I could but hear the sound of the waves beating on the shore, I believe I might recover, or at least I could die happy, but the sea was many thousands of leagues away. Now, as you know, you can hear the sound of the sea if you hold a shell to your ear. There was only one man in the town who possessed a shell, and that was Abel. The shell, indeed, was his only possession, but when he heard of his enemy's wish, he carried the shell to Cain's house and said, Here it is, listen to it by all means if you think it relieves you. And Cain held the shell to his ear, and his face contorted with rage and envy. You have had this all these years while I parched on the dry land, he cried, but I will take it from you now, and he crushed the shell between his hands. And so doing, he died, but Abel said, I can still listen to the wind. Its voice is as sweet as the voice of the sea. Just the same, said Dido indignantly. That rich man was a pig, a real pig. Did Abel get his things back after Cain died? As to that, Bran said, I can't tell you. But see, here we are arriving in Wandesboro. The assize town was very different from Bath Regis. It was laid out geometrically, a small walled town of neat thatched Roman villas, built strongly of clay and wattle, and all painted white. Mabon was staying in the governor's house, which was simply a bigger villa, with a large, square inner court containing the usual fountain and cactuses. King Mabon instantly set his stewards to organizing a feast in the main hall, and dispatched messengers to Lyonese City to make arrangements for the return of Lake Arianrod. Fair is fair, he said. Let no one claim I don't keep my word. I have my child, the old woman can have her pond, and furthermore, I'll send it back faster than I took it. He chuckled. My master of irrigation has hatched up a plan to ship it back by a series of air balloons helped by the updraft over Mount Catalonde, which will be a deal quicker and cheaper than all those llamas. How did you manage to remove it without the Guardian's knowledge? Inquired Mr. Windward. My spies picked a couple of nights. When he was down in Bath, reporting to the Queen, which he does twice a month. What a deal of trouble would have been saved, Dido thought, if the spies had only found the princess. I'd have been home by this time, and Captain Hughes wouldn't be in jail. While the mutton was roasting for the feast, they all lolled on warm earthenware couches, shaped like the letter P, laid on its side. The villa was centrally heated by underground ducts from Pampole and Catalonde. They reclined against wool-stuffed cushions and drank mead while Bran played his harp and sang. Ellen and Mr. Holystone sat side by side, apparently listening to the music, not talking to one another. Dido felt a painful tightness in her chest, either at the music or at the sight of them, so she moved over and listened instead to King Mabon, discussing with the English officers the state of affairs in New Cumbria. Bad as can be, and no better in High Brazil, Mabon was saying. Gwendion's foster brother. Caedmon. Luckily, the relationship is no closer. Proper tyrant he is, turned the whole country into a big game preserve, evicted half his subjects from their homes, cut off peasants' hands if they snatch so much as a guinea pig. A guinea pig, sir, indeed. Que, they call them hereabouts. Because of this sound, you know. King Mabon imitated a guinea pig's squeak so realistically that the governor's cat shot into the room and began searching suspiciously under couches. Or, the king went on, some say it is short for Quequemondo. Guinea pigs used to be the staple diet in High Brazil, until Caedmon declared that they belonged to the crown. He glanced over at his daughter and Holystone. His brow clouded slightly. He called, Gwyndion, my boy. Holystone rose a little reluctantly and came across the room. Sir? Dido caught a queer, polite echo of Captain Hughes's steward. No, boyo. It is I who should be calling you, sir, Mabon said, clapping him on the shoulder. Only it comes hard with a lad I taught to cast his first trout fly. Queer, it must seem to you, indeed, and different to take it all in. Oh, why? Burst out Holystone, looking harassed and miserable. Why must this happen to me? Why should I, of all people, be brought back in this way? To what end? As to why you, bless me if I know, said King Mabon frankly. But it had to be someone, now didn't it? And when you ask to what end, haven't I just been saying, gracious to goodness, why this whole region, with the exception of Lyonesse, which I pride myself as the peaceful and prosperous little country as you could hope to visit, the whole of Roman America, apart from that, is in a disgraceful condition of tyranny, anarchy, and misrule. Time it was the High King came back, someone who will be accepted by the people and set matters to rights. Are they still headhunting in Cumbria? He asked windward. Indeed, yes, sir. I gather it is a thriving practice. And things that go on in Beru you'd never believe. Brigandage, cannibalism. I believe they even sacrificed their grandmothers to sewer. Grandmothers! And in the streets of Manoa, you daren't go out at night because robbers make off with the silver manhole covers. You could fall straight into these sewers and get washed away. No, my dear Gwyndion. Arturus. Time it is you came back, not a moment too soon indeed. And then there's your good lady over in Cumbria. Some of her habits were taken in hand. Holystone looked even more unhappy. Have you ever met her, sir? Not I, my boy. Won't cross her frontiers, won't receive foreign rulers, but these gentlemen have met her, I believe. Multiple shook his head. The lieutenant said, the young lady has talked to her more than I have. Have you indeed, my dear? I live to tell the tale, uncommon that is, Mabon said. Tell us what she is like, then, eh? How to describe someone who is both wicked and sentimental, self-centered, silly, and terrifyingly powerful. Dido's usual readiness of tongue deserted her. And besides, it was, after all, poor Holystone's wife they were talking about, and he looked glum enough already. After some thought, Dido muttered, She sure wants Mr. Holy back. She don't think of much else. She wanted me to try and gull King Mabon into believing I was his daughter, so she'd get the lake back. She looked into Mr. Holystone's sad grey eyes. You have seen Guinevere, he said slowly. Is she much changed? How'd I know? Dido said crossly. I don't know what she was like afore, do I? All I know is she's been awaiting a plaguey long time, and it's upset her. She'd be the better for not having a mess of havey-cavey old witches round her, too. Lady Attarde and Morgan, and the other one, well, one of them's dead, she added thoughtfully, remembering the scene at Ellen's rescue. Which one? Inquired Bran, who had joined the group. His voice was sharp with interest. Dido glanced at him in surprise. I'd have thought you'd know, mister. It's the one as calls herself Mrs. Vavasour. An odd look came into Bran's face, sorrow compounded with relief. He lifted his shoulders as if a weight had fallen from them, and his cockatoo flew across the room and perched on his wrist.
Dido wondered what Bran's connection had been with the witch dressmaker, but Princess Ellen had now followed Holystone and sat down by her father, who tucked his arm around her affectionately. She said, "Mrs. Vavasour is dead? I am glad of that." She shivered and went on. "She told me she had set a snake to watch me outside the cave entrance, and that it would grow and double its size every day, and could see me through the crack and would bite me if I tried to get out. I didn't really believe her, but I used to think I could hear it hissing." "Ugh, how could you bear it, ma'am?" Mr. Multiple said with a shudder. "I can't abide snakes." "I dare say most of their witcheries are no more than mumbo-jumbo than to frighten credulous folk," said Mayborn. "But that owl did turn into Mrs. Vavasour," said Dido. "It ain't all mumbo-jumbo. And there was my reflection in the mirror," she thought. Ellen said, "Bran used to tell us when we were children that witchcraft was the wickedness in several people's minds combining to form something worse still, like making poison by mixing things that are harmless, taken singly." She looked into Holystone's face wistfully. "Alteus, Gwendion, can you really remember nothing of when we were children?" He shook his head. "Only a vagueness, like a dream half caught." "You don't recall how you used to stay with us, or that Bran here was your tutor?" "The best pupil I ever had," Bran said. "He never had to stay in to learn his principal parts, as you and your brothers did, Princess." "Why can't I remember?" muttered Holystone, pressing his brow as if to make a hole and let air into his brain. "Some external force is blocking your mind for its own ends," Bran told him. "It is of no consequence. You know that you are the High King. Other memory will return in time." The governor's cat had followed Ellen and now jumped into her lap. "They still follow you, eh?" said her father. "Did they do so in that English bath? And what did Miss Casterly say to that?" "Oh, she was a very kind lady, Dada. She sent her dutiful respects to you when I left, and gave me a pomander ball and a copy of Dr. Johnson's Dictionary of the English Language. The pomander ball I lost when the pirates captured our ship, but the dictionary has proved very useful." "Nothing like a good vocabulary, I always say." King Mabon beamed at his daughter. "But look, suppers are ready. All your favourites, my dear, roast mutton, baraberth, and sillybub." And that is the end of Chapter 9.